Hello, everyone. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Meg Delp, and I am the Director of Workplace Mental Health with NAMI. So I oversee our Stigma-Free Workplace initiative. So if you're curious about that, reach out. I am joined today by Maddie. Maddie, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. My name is Madison Rose. I am a part of NAMI Next Gen. It's an advisory council made up of 12 lovely individuals. And I also work full time as a proposal development analyst.
Amazing. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to have a super, super interesting conversation. We are going to dive into kind of professionalism, how that is evolving, how we want to start bridging those gaps that we are finding ourselves living with in the workplace, where we have, how things are typically done, and now how things are maybe changing for the better in most cases, and really try and understand how we welcome Gen Z into the workplace and do it super well. So let's dive in.
Sounds
Uh,
great.
yeah, first things first. Maddie, when you hear the word professionalism, what comes to mind?
When I hear the word professionalism, I'm thinking of somebody who is respectful, of somebody who's considerate of another person's time, of their agenda, also of their ideas. I will say, I think when I define professionalism, I am thinking more of behaviors and characteristics and work ethic rather than image.
I really love that distinction. I feel like for a long time, professionalism has brought in that image, that appearance that you show up with that work. And I think more and more, we are finding that we're celebrating individualism. And so having that be part of the workplace, being able to show up as your full self, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I'm curious, how is that showing up for Gen Z? How are they kind of seeing this differently, maybe, than previous generations?
I definitely think that it's kind of a common theme in this generation that we are kind of focusing more on individualism and, really showing up as yourself at work. And rather than maybe like a cookie cutter image, we're using our outward appearance to just kind of be who we are, just show up as you are. And definitely when we think of professionalism, we are thinking of that work ethic, that respect for other people's time and ideas. And I think that's about it.
Yeah, and I love you've mentioned respect twice. And I think that is so, so very important because when we are looking at how we are individuals at work, when we're showing up at work, how we feel we are true to ourselves, we want to make sure that we are taking into account how other people want to show up at work, how other people are feeling, and what they are expecting from the workplace. And so it does need to be that back and forth and creating a dialogue rather than just saying, this is how I want it and this is how it is. So, yeah, that dialogue I think is so important. Having that respect between manager, employee, leadership, all employees, it does need to go both ways. So,
Absolutely.
yes. And so, to me, that thread of respect is kind of part of that traditional professionalism. I'm wondering if there are other parts that you feel like are also an important thread to continue.
I definitely think just timeliness. And I think a lot of these ideas that I'm mentioning really do tie back into just being considerate of other people in the workplace. Timeliness and whether it's written or oral discussions, being, articulate and getting your ideas across while being, again, I hate to say it again, but respectful of everyone else that you're working with. And I think that also creates a culture of collaboration within the workplace. And you're able to get a lot more ideas and just interesting ideas when there's that two-way street where I'm comfortable sharing something with my managers, and my managers are comfortable sharing something back with me, and we're able to, make this inclusive culture.
Definitely. And I think as we allow for more individualism with that lens of respect, we find more psychological safety, which is the best. We know that psychological safety, it kind of welcomes discomfort rather than trying to make everyone the same. It's saying, hey, we all have different creative ideas, different ways to show up at work. And that's actually a great thing, so that we all have maybe a different solution to a problem we're trying to figure out. And when we're showing up with respect, when we feel like we can really be ourselves, encourage others to be themselves, like we're just going to hear more and more cool ideas, more and more uniqueness, and that can only benefit us. And I also want to mention that some things might be feeling outdated, maybe a little restrictive now. I'm wondering, for you, I know when we talk about the generations, we are stereotyping a little bit. For Gen Z, kind of in general, what is feeling outdated or restrictive?
I think as Gen Z, I think we're kind of walking away from the idea that in order to be professional, you have to show up at work in a suit every single day. For me, like makeup done, hair done. But I think we're kind of moving away from that and realizing that you can still be professional and you can still contribute so much to your company, even if maybe you're wearing, let's say, jeans and a little top, like a blouse or something. So still being appropriate, but not having to dress to the nines every single time you come into the office, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah. So, kind of going back to that appearance piece, like
Mm-hmm.
we want to start allowing for people to show up as themselves. And maybe that looks, or maybe that shows up in how they choose to dress or how they do their hair or, whatever applies to their individualism. Again, with that layer of respect, but really making sure that we are allowing that individualism to not be a threat to the workplace and rather viewing it as kind of a celebration of who that person is. Not everyone, enjoys showing their personality through their clothing or their hair or their makeup or whatever it is. But for those who do, it can be really, really helpful to let that shine. So, kind of that appearance we are trying to move away from. I will also say, you know, things that I am solidly millennial, very much smack dab in the middle. Things that I noticed that started showing up in my generation, piercings are really big, tattoos were a whole thing. And so, also part of that image, allowing that self expression with piercings, with tattoos. And, we want to notice that there is a level of appropriateness, ensuring that people are not offended by something we have chosen, but allowing that to be a dialogue rather than a right to punitive or right to being in the wrong. So having that conversation and saying, I want to express my individualism. How is that showing up in the company for my fellow employees? Is everyone feeling like they're on the same page? So again, just creating that dialogue.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I really love what you said about celebrating. It looks different for everybody. Some people may love showing up in a suit every day, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And I really like what you said about, with maybe the younger generation, the piercings, the tattoos, they're a way to celebrate, things that we enjoy. And I don't think that that takes away from professionalism at all. So I really like what you said about, having that conversation and, setting almost a boundary where as long as we're being respectful and we're not offensive in the way that we're portraying ourselves, I think it's a great thing to have that self-expression in a company's culture.
Definitely. And starting to more focus on, how is this person showing up as an employee? Are they getting all their projects done? Are their tasks getting done? Are they speaking to customers in a way that is awesome? Are they writing timely emails? Like the actual pieces of the job, are they doing those well? That is more important than what the person is choosing to wear for the day. And so trying to shift that framework of seeing the person and their effort in their job rather than first saying, how does this person look?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'm going to base my opinion on that person. So yeah, definitely that shift I think is just so important. If we start moving kind of into professionalism as it relates to mental health, uh, this is a frequent topic that comes up when I'm doing presentations with our partners, external, internal. We know that over time, people have gotten more and more comfortable talking about mental health in the workplace. The workplace mental health poll is coming out soon. We see that 3/4 of the workplace of American workers believe it's appropriate to talk about mental health at work. If we were to do this poll even 20 years ago, it would be very, very different. And so, as we look at mental health through that professional lens, oftentimes what it used to mean was this sense of conformity and polish, and that comes with emotional restraint, kind of that leave it at the door mentality. And that can be so, so harmful when our employee might be struggling. If they feel like, well, I can't bring it up, then they're not going to ask what resources they have access to. They're not going to ask their manager, hey, I'm really stressed. Can you help me prioritize my projects? They're not going to, feel safe asking for help, which means their productivity is going to suffer, their performance is going to suffer, their attendance is going to suffer. And so it creates this kind of downward spiral.
Mm-hmm.
So as we get more and more comfortable talking about mental health, we can reverse that and start spiraling up together, asking for help and doing things to support one another so we can rebuild that mental health.
Yeah.
We want, you go, Maddie.
I was going to say, I really appreciate what you're saying there. And I think it's almost kind of reframing how we look at our mental health as well. If I'm typing all day on my laptop and my wrist is broken, I'm not going to be able to perform as well at my job. Same thing with my mental well being. If I'm really struggling or feeling very burnt out, I'm not going to be able to perform to the best of my abilities because, mental and physical health, they really do play hand in hand with one another. And that reflects how you show up at the workplace.
Definitely. And I love that kind of similar, I guess it would be a metaphor, the physical health and the mental health comparison. We're understanding mental health so much more. And so understanding that, if your wrist is broken, the expectations are going to be a little lower until you are healed and able to get that cast removed.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, if you are struggling with your mental health, we want to notice things might be different for a little while, and we can support through to feeling better and feeling like we're back on track. So, having that understanding of mental health can be incredibly impactful. And I know the question is often like, how are we maintaining our standards without requiring sameness? And it really is just about that flexibility, seeing the person as an individual, understanding that they're going to need support sometimes. We're all going to need support sometimes. So when a person joins a company, if they have to kind of learn that company culture, what could that look like? For a new employee, young employee, what does it look like to really start understanding the culture of the company?
Again, with me and my metaphors, I kind of almost look at that like learning a new sport for the first time. If I am starting to play softball and I'm learning how to bat, and I try to bat right handed, and it doesn't work that well for me, and then I try to bat left-handed and I hit the ball out of the park. It's kind of the same thing in the workplace. You might be learning the company's culture and there's a certain way of doing something and it just doesn't work that well for you. And I think that's okay. You kind of have to readjust and say, I understand that this is how we usually do things. Could I maybe try to do it this way? Because I think that will work better for me and just for the supports that I need. And I think it's important to have that conversation early on so that there's no unrealistic expectations and you're able to have that collaborative environment where both parties are feeling heard and both parties have the resources that they need to be successful.
Definitely. And it is that lens again of we're all unique. We all want to do well at our jobs, right? Like we want to be productive. We want to show up for our colleagues in a way that feels really good. And maybe that just looks different than how other people are doing their job. It just, you need different supports. You need different things so that you can do your job super, super well. And having that conversation, having that door open for the conversations, step number one. As a people manager, creating that psychological safety, making sure your employees, your teammates, they know that they can come to you and ask for those supports, it's just invaluable. So again, kind of looking at the early career professionals, how can they adapt to the company culture that they are working on learning? It probably feels overwhelming, without starting to mask who they are. It is such a balance.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's a very big balance, especially to learn as a young professional in the workplace. I will say for me, what I did and what I think is my biggest advice is just to show up exactly as you are right from the get-go. I remember when I interviewed for my company 2 years ago now, I showed up to that interview in a bright pink suit and I was entirely myself and I let who I am shine while also showcasing the ideas that I had for the company and the fresh perspective that I brought to the table. And I think it's really important to kind of take what you need and really show who you are so that they know who they're getting from day one. And not every company is a perfect fit for every young individual. And that's entirely okay because through the interview process, I think that you find that company that's the perfect match for you. And those supervisors and those managers understand that you're able to do a fantastic job at your role in the company and you're able to have an amazing work ethic no matter how you show up, whether it's in a bright pink suit or not. And I think it's really just important to be true to yourself from day one.
Absolutely. And that can, honestly, it can feel pretty scary to do that if you're not used to it. But it is probably the best way to go. Because if you're showing up as your true self from day one, you're able to see how folks at this particular company maybe are responding to you. Are they super welcoming? Are they not so much? And then you can kind of gauge, is this a company I want to work for? So it goes both ways, right? We want to see how the people we're interacting with at a company are welcoming. And there are so many Gen Z folks who are looking for work or, maybe looking for their next job. We want to make sure we're welcoming them because they have fabulous ideas. Let's, by the way, would love to see the pink suit. If we dig a little bit deeper, let's talk about that line between, healthy adaptation and that unhealthy self-silencing. So kind of like, how do I need to adjust to fit a workplace culture versus how am I shutting myself down and now it's not good for my health? And then kind of speaking to the leadership, the management, how do they encourage more authenticity?
I definitely think for me personally, it's a fine line between being honest about my needs without being 100% transparent with things I maybe don't want to share in the office place. So I think it's important to have that line of not oversharing, but still being honest with your supervisors, your managers, with leadership in the company. And I think that you're able to, as a manager, I think you're able to foster that relationship by allowing your employees to come to you and making it a safe psychological place for them. Because when I'm feeling comfortable at my company and I'm feeling respected, I'm able to go to my manager and say, hey, this is kind of a lot for me right now. Is there any way you might help me be able to balance my time a little bit better? Do you have any tips? Hey, I might need to take a day off, might need to take PTO, and I'm going to feel comfortable sharing that if I'm feeling respected and that respect is reciprocated. Um, so I think just having that honest without being too transparent for me personally has really been beneficial.
Definitely. Yeah. And it sounds like your current company is doing a great job of creating that safety for you.
Absolutely. And I think it's you kind of learn a little bit more as you go. You kind of learn how your manager works and how to best
Mhm.
communicate with them. And I think the same thing is said the other way. I think that they sort of learn how you function best and the resources and the tools that you need. So I think it's, again, this two-way street. And when both parties are communicating clearly about their expectations and their needs and maybe work life boundaries, I think it really creates a beautiful environment.
Definitely. And your relationship with your manager, your boss, it's the same as any relationship. You have to grow it and put effort into it, time into it, learn about each other, and really work to kind of understand how you both operate so that you can find those commonalities, but also the ways that you are different, and remembering that that's okay that you're different, but figuring out even with those differences, how do we work well together?
Mhm.
So, yeah, building that relationship can be so, so, so helpful. And we have, just so everyone knows, we have resources on our Stigma Free website for managers on how to build that relationship, how to have great conversations. So definitely check that out. Um, Sorry, little aside for my Stigma Free plugin. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how we are starting to redefine professionalism through values and behavior rather than appearance and personality. How is that showing up for you? How is that showing up for other Gen Z
Mhm.
colleagues that you know? Let's just really kind of dive into that.
Yeah, I definitely think that work ethic is the biggest thing that I think of when that question comes up,
Mm.
because somebody might be a little bit shy and they are the best writer that you've ever met in your entire life, and they consistently are putting out these incredible papers, and they don't have to be the loudest person in the room, and they are still showing up as an amazing professional due to their work ethic. They get in those papers on time. They always put their best foot forward when they're creating them. And I think that really shows a lot about a person. Same could be said for somebody who maybe comes to work in jeans every day and they're the best leader at a presentation that you've ever seen. And they know how to conduct a meeting in an incredible way, but they're wearing their jeans. And I think that that shouldn't take away from their professionalism, because they're showing what an incredible leader, what an incredible asset to the team they are. And I think it's just sort of, as we've been saying, reframing that mindset about what it looks like today to be a professional in a workplace.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think noticing how the person is as a worker is the most important thing rather than having that uh, like visual judgment of the person. We want to see how they're showing up. This is especially true as we learn more and more about neurodiversity and how folks just interact differently, show up differently, they socialize differently, and that's just who they are. It's not something that's wrong with them, it's just who they are.
Mhm.
And so, not judging the person based on their appearance, based on how they're, yeah, just showing up, and instead saying, are they doing the job well? Are we pleased with what they are putting out? And that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. I think it's very important to kind of take the appearance, and I would even say maybe take the personality out of it and just look at the work ethic and how they communicate. I think how you're communicating is kind of a different thing than personalities, because some people are very confident, some people are shy. And I think no matter where you are on that personality spectrum, I think that you still have that work ethic, that professionalism, even if you might be a little bit more quiet or even if you're a little bit louder. Um, and appearance wise as well, I think that that goes the same.
You just reminded me of a past, not at NAMI, boss that I had. And he just had such high expectations for how we all communicated. And I am a very quiet person. I don't enjoy speaking in front of people. It is hard for me to share ideas verbally in front of a group, unless it's a presentation or LinkedIn Live, apparently. But when we would be in a big brainstorming session, it would be so helpful when we would have the option to like have a whiteboard up and be able to write something down rather than having to share verbally. So when managers are thinking about trying to be more inclusive, trying to invite everyone to the table, literally, you want to make sure that you are having those options for employees to interact in a way that feels really good for them and feels authentic for them, feels safe for them, because you might be missing out on ideas because someone is just a little bit more nervous, a little bit more quiet, and it's hard for them to kind of step into the spotlight. So, offering different ways for people to communicate can be incredibly helpful. Um, and it just, again, opens that door for even more creativity, which is just the best. Uh, Thinking about managers, actually, what do you wish managers understood more about individuality at work?
I think sometimes I wish maybe managers or supervisors were maybe a little bit more open to having these conversations. It can be very nerve wracking as a young professional stepping into the workforce for the first time and feeling like you can't have those conversations or bring your ideas to the table. So I think having an inclusive conversation and allowing somebody to say, hey, maybe this could be a new way that we try something, or maybe we can implement these tools at work because I think they would be very helpful. So I really just think having an open mind to things and being open to those conversations and open to trying something new, even though change is scary. Change is very scary for me as well. But I think oftentimes the best things happen when you have a change come to the table.
Definitely. And does any specific example come to mind to you of a manager who really opened that door for you, who had that kind of welcoming presence where you were like, yes, I can tell this manager what I'm going through?
Absolutely. Immediately, it comes to mind my very first job out of college. I was really struggling with my mental health. And I remember just kind of opening up a tiny bit to my boss at the time and saying, hey, I'm kind of struggling right now. And he immediately said, well, then you need to take some time off because you will not be able to perform to the best of your abilities and put your best foot forward if you're struggling. So don't feel bad about taking that time off. Take what you need and please go get better. And that really stuck with me. And it showed me that an amazing boss is going to be okay with you taking some time to yourself or taking a step back. And they're going to be welcoming of those conversations so that you can have that relationship and be able to communicate your needs in the workplace.
Yeah, so really seeing you as a human first and saying, like, hey, this person, human,
Mhm.
needs some time to rest, recharge, rebuild, and I know they'll come back and totally knock it out of the park. That's
Absolutely.
amazing. I love that. Okay, so managers work on being open, create that space where employees are feeling like, yes, my manager hears me and sees me, and I can continue to be open. So, as we head towards the end of our session today, Uh, what I would like to kind of leave us with is that we are working to reframe professionalism from this idea of sameness, where we all are showing up the same, looking the same, doing all the same things, and rather noticing how we're treating people and how we uphold shared values and like really how we're doing our job. So shifting that view of professionalism so we can all feel a little bit safer, a little bit more welcome. Um, I'm wondering, Maddie, does that feel aligned with kind of what we've been talking about, what Gen Z is looking for?
Absolutely. I really do think you hit the nail on the head there. I also did just want to add super quickly. I also think it's important as a young professional entering the workforce that we don't take advantage of a manager being very understanding and, respectful of our needs. I think it's still important to, try your very best and just don't try to overuse your manager being very understanding and respectful of your needs. So I think it's kind of a give and a take.
Definitely. I think that's so important because our managers are human too, right? We want to make sure that they are feeling seen and heard. And we want to make sure that our managers have the training to be able to say, hey, I need time off or I need help with my mental health. So, yeah, it does. It goes both ways. We want to make sure everyone is feeling as good as possible. Um, I feel like I have so many more questions, but unfortunately, we are like just at our time. Uh, any final words, Maddie? Any final recommendations?
I think I will leave it at I think as a supervisor or a manager, I think it's important to be open to these new ideas that young professionals or Gen Z is bringing into the workplace. And I also think as young professionals, as a young professional myself, I also think it's important when you're entering a new company and trying to learn the culture to really understand the why behind, these policies, these procedures that are in place because there is a reason. And then maybe as you're developing a working knowledge of those things, maybe you think, oh, I think that this might be a little bit improved if we do it this way. And then politely bringing those ideas up. As I've been saying this whole time, I sound like a broken record. Having that two-way street conversation, I think, will be super beneficial in the workplace.
Definitely. And I love the idea of finding the why between company policies because you're right. There is always a why. It's like when I would go hiking at this one park near me, and at the bottom of the hill, there was a sign that said, hang gliding not allowed. You know that was only there because someone went hang gliding and it didn't end well. So there's always a reason, there's always a why, and it can create a lot of empathy for the company itself, honestly, for the HR folks when we understand the why. Because you're right, there is always a why. Okay, thank you so much for being here today, Banny. It has been so enlightening to hear from the Gen Z voice. We are redefining professionalism. We are focusing more on how we're showing up literally at work and doing our job rather than appearance. And so we are building that psychological safety, creating that two-way street, focusing on respect, just so much more about humans being humans at work. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone who has joined us today. I hope y'all will continue the conversation in the comments. You can reach out to us at stigmafree@nami.org. We are happy to continue the conversation and talk more about workplace mental health. Thank you, Maddie.
Thank you.